Today I read Bloodhound, Crowbar Medicine, #1. This is just a little vlog, not a review, because I do not have any editing software yet, and also very little talent. So both of those things are sort of needed to come out to make anything that's going to be entertaining. In lieu of that, I'm just going to talk to you like you're one of my friends, because chances are if you are watching this, it's just because you're one of my friends, and I thank you for that. Hopefully it's Justine, because she's like the prettiest of my friends. So, thank you, Justine. The rest of you, get prettier. Alright, Bloodhound, Crowbar Medicine #1, is a continuation of Bloodhound, this comic series from DC from 2004. I enjoyed it back then a lot. It came out during a lot of crossovers. Infinite Crisis was happening at the time. I was really getting driven away from mainstream comic books. Mainstream superhero comic books, I should say. But Bloodhound was sort of special in that it had very little interconnectivity with the rest of the DC universe. There was one issue that crossed over with another of co-creator Dan Jolly's comics at the time, Firestorm, and the last arc dealt with a villain that was in DC proper. But other than that, it was basically free. There wasn't Batman or Superman. It wasn't all the crossovers shoved in like you get in every book now, and even most of the books at the time. That's probably in part why it was sort of a failure, is since it wasn't viewed as important, I'm guessing a lot of people overlooked it, which is a shame because it was a really good series, unique character, especially for DC at the time, a violent book without being excessive, and just an overall really entertaining read. And all of that is still going on and still exists in this 9 years later after the last issue came out. Without going into a lot of spoilers, your main characters, Travis Clevenger, a disgraced cop, and his FBI handler/partner, Saffron Bell, are trying to reconnect with some of Trev's family? Yeah, family is the correct term, even though it's a little murky as to how their relations exist in this book. A problem that Dan actually is going to address in the second issue, with a little backup feature right on the inside cover explaining the story so far. Pardon my fan. I'm just very overweight, and it keeps me cool. Otherwise, I would be very nervous and sweaty right now, which is important information for me to tell you, Justine, and the other non-Justine people who might be watching. Why I like this book in particular is it picks up pretty seamlessly from where the series ended, but it still serves as a good introduction. Apart from one minor misstep in the first couple of pages, this could be my first intro to the series, and I don't think I would ever have any problem following along. And was one kind of thing that, not a complaint, but just the first few 20-odd pages, a lot of setup for what's going to be happening during the rest of the series, instead of what's really important for this issue. Well, it's important in this issue, but it's just there to serve for the grander scheme, which is nice, because at the end of the book, you actually have a sense of why this mini-series exists. A lot of books, you don't. There's going to be a story, and you're going to like it. Or you're not going to like it, but you're supposed to like it. But in this, there's a clear setup. A sets up B, and while that's not important in the great scheme, it does set up C, which is. So I'm happy to actually have a reason why this is getting published, why I need to keep reading it. It's a nice change of pace. Everything that was good about the first series is back. Dan Jolly's still the writer. Leonard Kirk returns. He's maybe not a master draftsman, but he is great figure work, great expressions. There's never been a bad Leonard Kirk comic I've read. I've never had a reason to not read a comic with him drawing. The only thing that's sort of lacking from the first series is the cover. It's not a bad cover. It actually depicts the story and depicts what's happening in the story very well. It shows everything that you're going to be getting, what you're dealing with, and I like that. The problem is, compared to the earlier covers by Drew Johnson. Drew Johnson was pretty much the best cover artist in the early to mid 2000s, probably still today, would rank up there. The use of just everything. Just the old Bloodhound comics stood out in a way this new one on the cover doesn't. Um, the best way to explain it is we were looking for it on the shelf. We passed over it a couple times, and I just could not see it for whatever reason. I know it's got this nice yellow stripe, but it doesn't have the same eye-catching appeal that the old covers did. The closest example to those now would probably be like the Daredevil or Hawkeye covers, and how those things just jump off the shelf at you all the time. It's the only thing lacking. I mean, getting a Leonard Kirk cover is not bad. It's really good, but that part is a little disappointing compared to the old issues. The other thing I really like is in the story, much like the old series was very violent. It was violent but never excessive, and that follows up here. Even though there's one scene in particular with mass casualties and injuries, including involving children. But when the actual scene, you don't see the scene depicted, you only see the aftermath. In the aftermath, there are maimed bodies, but they're all adult police officers that were on the scene. Not like I'm happy that the cops are dead, but there's the one thing this series has always done is it doesn't showcase victims or the bad things that happen to the victims. Every time there's violence, it's usually actually against someone who has dedicated their life to putting themselves in the way of it, in the way of harm, or it is to the villains themselves. Innocent women, children, men, usually while bad things might happen to them, you do not have to see it on the pages. And I think that's a really important distinction that a lot of books that just miss out. And because I hate that, personally. I mean, maybe you like it, I don't know. But I've never cared for it. I don't need to see the violence. I grew up reading 80s comics books mostly. And you never saw the horrible things. You know horrible things are supposed to be happening, but you never saw it. That's why I can go back and I can read like Fantastic Four from the 60s or any of these old books, and bad things might happen, but I don't need to see people being ripped apart to understand, like, wow, that person got ripped apart. If you just tell me it happened, I'll believe you. I don't think you're lying to me if you tell me that, if you're the writer of the book. I understand some books really like it. Jeff Johns seems to enjoy it, just not for me. But other than that, I don't know what to say about the issue. It's a really good setup. It takes place in not the real world. As I said before, this was originally a DC book, but they were the rights I transferred, I believe, back to Dan Jolly and Dave Johnson, the co-creator. You can talk to him on Twitter. I'm sure he'll be able to clear that up. He's very responsive on Twitter. It's a very positive thing to see, especially when I first read the series. There's no way to contact people like this. You can maybe email them and get a response, but there wasn't a nice instant back and forth. So the book takes place in a version of the world that is scrubbed clean of any of the DC stuff. There's still superhero or super-powered people. There's villains, but there's not like a Joker. Thankfully, since that featured so minimally in any of the old books, they were able to just kind of wipe it away when they reprinted the series in trade this summer. And kind of put it in a more realistic world. It's what it feels like. Because I guess any world where you don't have Superman or Thor flying around is going to feel more realistic. The powers are pretty usually small. There's nothing has happened that's universe shaking yet. And given that this is a street level book about a cop who just used to be really fat, I don't expect that to happen. We do need more Fat Clevenger though, actually, while I mention him. That is my favorite aspect of Bloodhound, is that this giant hulking man used to just be really, really fat, but he was just as good as his job when he was. So I hope at some point, either in Crowbar Medicine or in the next miniseries or Dark Horse Presents, we get a return to see Fat Clevenger work. Maybe a one-issue special. I don't know. I just want to see Fat Clev. I really like Fat Clev, and he did not get a lot of panel time in the old series, and none so far now. But that pretty much, I think, covers it. It's a good book. Oh, no, it does not cover it. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm not a reviewer, because I would have started the final paragraph like 4 times, and that would have been terrible. That's why it's a vlog. That's why we're just talking. That's why you and me belong together, Justine. It's sort of set in the real world, but not quite. The closest thing, storyline-wise right now, that I can relate to is sort of the beginning of Marvel's Civil War, where someone with not a lot of control over their powers, something bad happens, civilians are involved, and then people want to defend themselves. And a lot closer to that is probably the gun control argument that's happening in America right now. It's not anything that's overt in your face, or where if you have a certain idea on the politics that you're going to be offended either way reading this. It's just sort of presenting its own take on it. I'm assuming that's what Dan was going for. I haven't actually asked him about it, but even if it's not, it's just what I picked up on. And I'm not very smart, so I presume it's a theme. But yes, I say you should just read the book. It's $3.99, which is the comic book price now. But it's a good series. The old series was a good series. You can talk to Dan about it on Twitter. He's very nice. There's really no reason not to, unless I guess you don't like comic books, in which case you probably, again, aren't watching this. Unless, I guess you're Justine, because you'll watch what I talk about, Justine, but you don't read comic books. So, it's kind of a weird loop there. Also, you're in Australia, and I don't think, it's probably too violent for Australia. You guys have weird rules. But yeah, that is my look at this book for right now. Thank you for watching my disjointed ramblings.